Previously on the closing pitch, you just loved what was going on at Driveline and made the switch.
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate enough when I started taking my son down there to develop some relationships, and man, God bless those guys that were on the floor at that time.
The first time that I ever saw one of your tweets, it was you putting sensors on your son, and had the sensors on his body while he was throwing, and you got a lot of heat on that tweet. And when looking at it, when I first saw it, I was like, oh, dang, that's crazy. And then I started really digging into it. I was like, that's actually really smart.
But what we wanted to try to see was are we actually throwing better? That is really the meat of the question that we're trying to answer. The reason that we do a markered motion capture assessment with anybody that we train at Driveline, youth, high school, college, or pro, is because we want to quantify how are you moving right now.
Well, you never translated. You never taught that. There's a different swing to that. There's a different methodology to how you actually have to approach hitting a baseball with that type of bat, because it's a drastic difference. So my question to that dad is, okay, you can pay for the success of your kid at 13 and 14U, but what are you then paying for in the future?
If there was anything that I could change with the Thanos snap, yeah. I think I would change parents in this country to not have their definition of success for their child's youth baseball experience be predicated solely on wins, and it would be solely on skill development and emotional validation.
Emotional validation. Go down that route. Emotional validation. Can you explain what you mean by emotional validation?
Let's finish it.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of The Closing Pitch. Where we left off, we were at part 1 with Deven Morgan. In this episode, it is the continuation of that interview. It is part 2. And in this conversation, we go into the incentive structures and how to develop a strong ecosystem around our players. Deven has really good answers when it comes to this. Also, we talk about weighted baseballs. I know that this is a heated topic when it comes to social media. It is debated continuously. So Deven gives his thoughts on it. How do we gain actual healthy velocity? I think when it comes to that topic, gathering as much information as you possibly can is always a good thing. It'll help you in your training. So with that said, enjoy part 2 with Deven Morgan of Driveline. Please give us a review, 5 stars preferably. This helps us get more guests onto the podcast, as well as it gives us a little bit more clout in the social space. If you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel, please subscribe to our channel. That helps us out a lot as well. Besides that, enjoy this episode, and I can't wait to get your feedback. Thanks.
Think about the way that I'm reacting to my child's sports performance. Am I doing that in a way that is emotionally considerate to them? Am I doing that in a way that gives them validation for their efforts? Am I sending that signal from the top? Because I can talk about emotional validation from kids until I'm blue in the face. But then if my kid gets in the car and he went 1 for 4 on the day, and I'm reading him the riot act about all the things that he or she did wrong, I am not sending signals in consideration of me wanting for that kid to feel validated.
Would you say it's picking out one thing that they did really good, no matter if it was a play on the field or them being the first one out of the dugout or them hustling down the line? Would you say that that's what you mean by emotional validation, is hey, at least give them one thing that, hey, you did awesome at this?
100%. We have to send some signals to acknowledge their successes and the things that you can control. Because again, we're talking about baseball, man. And as soon as that ball leaves my fingers, I'm out of control. As soon as the ball leaves my bat, I'm kind of out of control. The outcome is typically no longer decided by me. I mean, if you throw, 105 like Arnoldus Chapman, you have a little bit more control over the outcome, right? If you hit the ball over the fence, well, that's the one time that you have all the control over the outcome. But past those kind of outlier experiences, man, there's a ton of stuff that can happen, right? So, there's this constant refrain from some people about kids nowadays don't know how to play the game, right? Well, how are we teaching them to play the game? These kids are representative of the systems and structure and the ecosystem that we present to them. So if I have a kid who, okay, example. Years ago, my son was like 9 years old, and he was playing up a little bit, which I'm not even sure that I think was the right thing now in retrospect, but whatever. He was playing up against, and there was an 11-year-old kid that was in our league, and that was the target that he wanted to perform like that kid when he was 11. And we were playing a game here in our Shoreline area at Upper Shoreview. Shout out anybody in the Shoreline area. And that kid was on the bump, and my kid's in the box, and it was like a 2-2 count or 2-1 or something like that. And he got a fastball over the plate, and he hit it very hard and very far, and it did not go out. And it got caught, I don't know, like 5-10 feet short of the track. And he comes back to the dugout, and he's like, sad sack, the head's down, and I'm like, buddy, you won. You're 9 years old. You had an 11-year-old on the bump throwing hard, and you hit that thing as hard as you could. You won that outcome, and I understand that it's not going to resolve itself in the box score right now. But if you maintain that approach, there's a couple things I know are going to happen. You're going to get older. You're going to get stronger. And like the good thing that you're looking for is going to come. I have to send some signal from the top down that, like, man, I got to acknowledge that type of effort, right? And that same thing is true if you have a kid that hits a worm burner to the shortstop. If you put your head down and you're like, oh, I hit a ground ball, blah, 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 blah. Well, you don't give yourself the option to turn that into a productive outcome. If you hit that worm burner into the 6 hole and you bust your tail going up the line and you turn that into a hit, I want to celebrate that, and I want you to understand as a youth athlete, you had an opportunity to control, and you did everything you could to produce a good outcome, and that responded well, right? You bust your tail up the line. A couple things can happen. You turn it into a hit. You make them make a bad throw, or maybe you just get out. But hey, I'm still happy because you did the best that you could with the stuff you could control. And that is hustling out of the dugout. I mean, it's hustling out of the dugout. It's playing the game the way that we want it to be played, with intention and intent.
Would you say the ultimate controllables are your emotions and your thoughts while you're playing? And would you also say that parents are the best teacher when it comes to that?
100,000%, because that's where it all starts with, right? I mean, you have zero shot at like trying to find emotional validation with yourself as a youth athlete if you go into the game and you don't have the ability to kind of to be in control to some degree of your emotions. We have to acknowledge that there are some blockers there for young kids, just at a biological level, right? We understand that like the frontal lobe isn't going to get fully formed until they're like 23 or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's late. It's later in life.
Yep.
Yeah, we're not talking about a landscape of people who are like in perfect ability to moderate their emotions all the time. There's a developmental psychologist named Jean Piaget who proposed that kids don't really do a good job of understanding abstract thought until what she called their formal operational stage, which begins at 13.
So abstract thought meaning what?
So abstract thought meaning I need to be able as a youth athlete to understand the difference between we lost a game and I'm a loser, right? Kids naturally, if they go 4 for 4, they're 10 feet tall and bulletproof. And they go 0 for 4 and they are a loser. That's not Justin Turner at the highest level of consequence and the highest level of competition going, if I go 0 for 3 with hard hit balls, that I still feel like I had a successful day. Kids, I think at a biological level, have a hard time navigating that because it requires you to subtract yourself, the definition of yourself, from the definition of the experience, right? You could lose a little league game and still have produced a crap ton of valuable effort and output. But kids naturally are very much like first principle driven. They want to win because winning makes them feel good. They don't want to lose because losing makes them feel bad. And as parents and coaches, we can put kerosene on either one of those fires, right? I can hyper incentivize to my kid that like it is incredibly important that we win this game. And if I do that, I'm also setting up like this back channel possibility that if we do lose, that kid feels disproportionately bad about the experience. And when, look, man, if like Nate Yeske, Marty Fox, Tim Corbin is not in attendance, then who gives a crap, right? Like I have a good friend, guy that trained at Driveline, now is running his own training facility, TJ Antone. TJ's in the Reds org, throws like 101, 102. He's pretty good at sports. TJ posted on Twitter a couple days ago, like his pictures of himself as a little league. And TJ's like a built dude. He's like, I don't know, 6'5", 220 or whatever. Young TJ was like a little like roly-poly dude. And he's just like as happy as hell in his little league picture. I think, again, in terms of what's most important, yeah, man, we got to be able to shift these kids towards positivity and consideration of just like a reality of what we're presenting to them as a little league baseball experience. What is the worst thing that can happen? Like honestly, what's the worst thing that can happen? If you understand that as a coach and you understand that as a parent, you have a whole landscape of opportunities that you can embrace. Simultaneously, I also get that like winning is important. Like 100%. Yes, we want kids to understand the importance of winning, but I think above that, I think we need them to understand the importance of competition is important. I mean, we're talking about baseball, right? And the old saw of like, you go 3 for 10 for your whole career and you're in the hall. Well, if I'm going to fail 7 out of 10 times, I need a way to like contextualize that failure. Youth kids are just at a disadvantage at a biological level to be able to do that. And it's incredibly important for the adults in the equation to send them some signal in kind of to balance the way that they're naturally going to kind of lend to look at it through this very like first principle lens assessment of their performance.
So Deven, how do you implement that type of model into your training program at Driveline? So I followed Driveline since, Kyle started it way back in the day and all the old school videos he put out and everything. And now
when you're in the parking lot.
Yeah, basically.
Oh yeah.
And seeing obviously Driveline's now built into this massive business. It's data driven, it's research driven. You got data points on everything, and that's amazing. And you use tech and different training tools and techniques and everything. And then talking about how you approach it with the youth side and everything that we just went into from an emotional standpoint. How do you blend the two into your program?
So our program for the Driveline Academy is very much like our core principles are basically exactly that. We focus on skills at scale because, again, I just understand that I need to embrace this opportunity to focus on skill acquisition and skill mastery and consideration of the needs for higher level competition. I can take the influence for what the top level guys need and essentially like draw you a map, right? You throw the ball 50 miles an hour now, I want you to be high eighths by the time that you're 18 years old. I got time. I just need to continue to like give you stimulus that's going to push us down that path. So for us, skills at scale is very much a big thing. Because we have all the tech in the world, we have the ability to kind of track that stuff through data. Which is a really, really critical thing when you start talking about the emotional validation piece. It runs into it because I'm training with data constantly, I'm constantly giving these kids signal that they know that they're getting better. This is the massively kind of understood thing about, the core question that we started probably a half hour ago before I started blathering about all this other stuff, right? The point of doing a biomech motion capture on my son is, yes, I want to be able to quantify his movements in the current term and understand his development and mechanics over time. What I also want to do is I want to give him a system where he is free to throw the ball hard. We're able to do that safely because we moderate for the innings played and the pitches thrown, and we can bring Driveline pulse into the equation to understand workload a little bit better as well, but not going off into that pathway. Because if we do that enough, he's going to see that he's throwing the ball harder. And I want to take advantage of like gamification principles to make that progress in his face. You cannot escape it. You are confronted by the fact that you are getting better at the core skills that are required in the game of baseball. And that's the part where it's like, oh, I feel good about the effort that I'm bringing into this thing, the attitude with which I approach competition and training, because I know it's resolving in something that's getting better. It's not going to a cage and having a 45-minute lesson with a dude sitting on a bucket and you just walk out and it's like, well, I got some reps. And like, I'm not saying that that's bad. It's possibly good. What I want to do though is, if I have the option, because we have all this data, is I want to show that kid progress. Because if my kid goes and plays Fortnite, he understands the level that he starts at, he achieves stuff in the game, pushes his level up, and it is incredibly transparent, that progress. Same thing in MLB The Show. Same thing in Rainbow Six Siege. Same thing in basically any game that these kids play nowadays. They understand these kind of concepts of gamification, and having like very, very transparent feedback given to them that they're getting better at the activity. The problem in baseball is that oftentimes the only way that we define kind of the outcome of participation is through a box score. Box score is a great way to record the result of a game. It's not a great way to capture developmental progress. So for us, this kind of loop between focusing on skills at scale and also focusing on emotional validation is all connected through this focus on like, man, it is right in your face that you are getting better at the game. The other thing that kind of gets layered in there is not only like, it's not a zero-sum environment, right? If I PR, that doesn't mean that you guys can't PR, right? We're all kind of on this individual path. And again, I'm for sure the slowest thrower out of the three of us. If I crack 65, that's a great PR for me. It's not diminished by you guys throwing 80. You know what I mean? Like we can form this type of like family, brotherhood, engaging and supportive environment where it's like, man, I am pushing for the development of the whole, right? It's not this kind of like, well, that guy's doing better than me and I'm pissed off, that again, just kind of like, because kids are going to come in at different paths. We have kids that came into our academy who are like, elite level performers in the current term. We also have some kids who are like, 1.5 standard deviations behind where they should be for their current term age. I can take both of those kids in my environment and I can serve them appropriate training and appropriate competition. And then we're just going to see where we get to over time. And it could be that kid that was 1.5 standard deviations behind ends up being the better performer in the long term. I don't know, but those decisions should be reflective of the commitment and time and effort that those kids put into it. So my job as the administrator is just to construct a system that is so engaging and rewarding for them when they make that type of progress.
It's like I love when I was younger. I loved playing Mario 3 and get into the different levels
with the Tanuki suit.
Yes, it's a one player game, and I could play that for freaking ever. There was no other person. It was just me in the game, and all I cared about was I got to like level whatever, and my friend would be like, "Oh, I got to this level." I was like, "Oh, right on, I'm almost there." But it wasn't like I was pissed off at that kid, like, "Oh yeah, okay," and I just went back and played again. No, I was just like, "Yeah, I'm getting up in the levels." I view that the same way when it comes to baseball development. And you're right. The box score is more of a map of the game. It's not a map of development.
Yeah, and to be really honest, we also can kind of apply that same approach if I'm just on a dirt field. We have a Driveline of a free youth practice guide PDF. It's just free. You can download it. One of the things that's on the back of that thing is a quality at bat sheet. And the way that it's designed to work is it essentially you can. This is what I did as a little league coach. That's the whole reason we built it. Is I'm coaching third base and I've got my clipboard and I've got a pen and a paper, and I am kind of recording a score to the way that these kids approach the game, not based on what they produce in the box score, but produce on like, hey, did you have a 5-pitch at bat, right? Like, I mean, that's a good thing, that's a good thing. Did you have a 5+ pitch at bat that didn't result in a strikeout? Did you hit the ball hard? I mean, there's just different ways that you can kind of take this approach to quantifying performance that's different than what you find in a box score. And you can, again, put that signal in front of your kids. We would go out and play a game. I mean, the score is going to be the score. But I also can look at my QAB sheet and go like, Timmy, Tommy, Jane, Judy, you guys had great days because you guys had this, and this, and this, and this attribute to the way that you played the game today. I mean, yes, it is great that like the cost of technology is going to continue to go down. And it's going to make a lot of these kind of approaches more economically viable on dirt fields. I don't think that you don't have to have a 43,000 square foot facility with $250,000 of technology to run a successful youth baseball program. What I think you do need to do, I think, maybe I'm wrong, but I think what you need to do is you need to kind of exhaust your efforts to find ways to engage with your kids and empower them to know that they're getting better at the game. Because I don't think that there's anything more impactful to keeping a kid in the game of baseball than rewarding them for whatever amount of progress that they make. And look, man, some of that progress is going to be like, we finally got a chance to play varsity baseball as a senior because you couldn't play JV anymore. But that's only going to happen if a kid doesn't get disinterested from the game because they're not a stud when they're 15. There's got to be more than one path.
I've been on this camp of I want to bring as many people into the game as possible. I love this sport so much, and it teaches a lot of life lessons. And I've never been on the bandwagon of, well, if you don't throw 90, get the hell out of our sport. I think that's the wrong thought process on a lot of levels, and you're just destroying the game and destroying the ecosystem and the culture rather than building it up. And if you look back at the old players back in the 20s and 30s, that's all they really cared about was trying to get more bats and gloves into the hands of American boys and girls, not just a specific group of people.
Yeah, the problem that we're running into, right, is that like you can kind of throw a rock nowadays and hit a travel team.
That is such a great quote. I feel like that should be the topic. That should be the subject of the episode.
and again, I really want to emphasize the fact that like these men and women that are running these travel teams, most of them are moms and dads that are just like me, and we just have the best intentions for our kids, right? Like that is where this thing all starts. But then we enter in this ecosystem, travel baseball, which typically just is like the single carrot that we're looking for is winning, right? We've got to win. Well, if we go into a tournament weekend and my 12U team is in a bracket of like 16, there's one team that's going to check that box, right? So that means that there's what's 15 times 12. Like it's a lot of kids. They're going to walk away from that tournament not being able to check that box. So the natural question there is that like, all right, well, what am I doing to validate the efforts of all of those other kids, right? Like, what am I doing to help these kids understand that just by engaging in the game of baseball, that it can't be this very binary, you win, therefore you should continue to play, or you lost and you should stop. So we have this problem, right, where like travel baseball has drastically kind of increased its footprint. That naturally takes away from recreational leagues. So then that kind of puts this question to the recreational league of like, are you going to focus on engagement, or are you going to do this other thing and try to run your travel league, or you run your recreational league like a travel league? Like I know rec leagues where their all-star team is a club team that just so happens to have the same 12 kids end up being the all-star team at the end of the year. If you have a majors division, so this is your 12-year-old Little League division, right? If you have a majors division of 60 kids, right? So you got 5 teams of 12. If the same 12 that were on that club team are the same 12 that are locked in for roster spots on that all-star team, you're essentially saying to those 48 kids that never had a shot, because you made the decision back in February who's going to be on your all-star team, doesn't matter, right? Like it doesn't matter. There's nothing you can do on this field that's going to open you up to kind of this recognition and reward, because you're running your little league almost like it needs to be subservient to your travel team.
You're de-incentivizing people to actually play the game.
100,000%. And I will say that like certainly All Stars doesn't need to be the only way that we can incentivize and celebrate these kids, which then works downstream to, as the coach of that little league team, you're going to play 12 to 20 games or whatever it is. I'm sure you're going to celebrate your 3-4 hitter. I'm sure you're going to celebrate your starting pitcher or two. How are you celebrating the achievements and the developments of your other 12 kids, right? I had this last year coming out of COVID was the last year that I might be coaching Little League Baseball just because I'm running into a time crunch right now. There was a kid on that team who quite frankly is probably one of like the worst baseball players that I've had in the 9 or 10 years that I've been coaching Little League. All year, I tried to set that kid up for success as best as possible. He was not a shortstop. I gave him some innings at shortstop. It didn't go well, but I wanted to celebrate even in the times where he got balls hit to him and you didn't turn into an out. I would be like, yo, man, you were in position to make that play. It's just the execution. Like, I'm trying to celebrate the little things. Mm-hmm. That kid, there's no real super happy ending to this story. He didn't hit a walk-off homer in our end of season tournament. He didn't pitch a shutout for us in the final game of the year. He didn't make All-Stars. What he did do is he signed up to play summer ball because he wanted to keep playing baseball. I don't think that kid is going to go and turn himself into Reggie Jackson, right? He's not gonna become Aaron Judge. He's not going to be that's not his path. All I'm trying to do is find a way to give every kid on my roster, from the worst kid to the best kid, some type of engagement and validation and want them to continue in the game. Because even if he doesn't go play high school baseball, if someday he has a family and he wants to have kids, and those kids he sends, hey, I had fun playing baseball. Let's go have a catch. Well, now I'm just man, I've opened up a thing downstream simply based on being able to give the worst kid on my roster as positive an experience as possible.
And you never know that could potentially, that game of catch in the future could potentially build a better relationship with his son or daughter because of what you just did, which is way more important
than any of this.
Than a tournament trophy that says you triple SA first place.
100,000%. It is a relationship builder, right? I mean, I don't know about your guys' family, but man, baseball is a part of my family. Yeah. It's a part of my wife's life because she's a gamer. It's a part of my kids' life. It's a part of our extended family's life to support these kids. And I have no guarantee about what my kids are going to do in the future of their baseball lives. I honestly don't care. What I do think we've been able to do is connect them to, and this is a little bit on the hippy dippy side of things, but things that baseball teaches you. Man, it'll teach you to be humble. It'll teach you to work hard. It'll teach you to be a good teammate. It'll teach you to be a good communicator. These are things that the game is infuriating, right? Baseball can be absolutely infuriating at times. I mean, other than Shohei Ohtani and Robbie Ray, baseball, the professional baseball at the highest level of consequences was really, really infuriating for a lot of guys who are 1% of the 1% athletically. Those guys still want to play the game next year, and they want to play the year after that, and they want to play for as long as possible because we get addicted to this thing because we love the game, but also because of what it teaches us. And look, man, at the end of the day, I just want more kids to play baseball, and I want to have them to have a viable path forward because I believe in the value of all that other stuff that the game teaches. But if what I do is just hyper select for only the kids who are the genetic outliers, if I go hey, I'm going to start a travel team and I'm going to pick the 12-year-olds that are biological 14-year-olds, I got a lot of other kids and I'm not giving a shot to. If I run my little league and my recreational league like that, right? I have a lot of kids and I'm just making a decision when they aren't even at puberty about what their athletic future is, which is fairly preposterous.
And brother, if you park that dude in the right field in the bottom of the lineup every game, that kid is out of the sport. 100%.
100%. And it's that kid that I was talking about, he when it came to our end of season tournament, he did play right field because we are at a stage of things where it's okay, I have to act as a coach in consideration of all of these other kids and him. The reality is that he was unlikely to be able to have a great amount of success playing in a shortstop spot.
Sure.
I wanted to give him some innings and some experience at shortstop during the year, because if all I do is I park him in right field in March and he's still out there in June, he's playing it that way, right? I mean, there aren't a lot of balls hit to right field. A lot of them aren't hard hit in the first place. And you kids go out there and they pick daisies and they fall asleep. What do you have to do when you play shortstop? I have to be engaged with the game on a pitch by pitch basis. I have to watch my catcher. I have to watch my pitcher. I have to think about how my first base, my shortstop, my second baseman are playing. I hopefully need to communicate a little bit with my outfield, depending on how hitters are hitting. Man, there's a lot of stuff that I have to be cognizant of, in addition to just like the actual task of fielding a ground ball if it gets hit to me. Whether I'm successful at those things or not is hopefully going to make me play right field with a higher degree of engagement and a higher degree of just like actual preparation, because I've had an experience playing a high leverage position.
So we are getting close to the tail end of this. I wanted to try to keep this under an hour. I knew it wasn't going to happen. But I want Dave to ask his question.
I don't even know.
No, I want you to ask your question about throwing and weighted balls. I think
Okay.
I think this is a good conversation, because it's one of those things that there's a lot of people that are on one side. There's a lot of people. There's no one in the middle, I feel like. But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, no, something I was going to bring up, because you had mentioned your conversation with maybe a 13-year-old earlier in this conversation, him talking about certain, swing design, etc. And I live on the pitching world, and I've always kind of had this idea of how to go about pitching, or how to go about pitching development from guys who just enter the space at 9 years old, working their way all the way up to high school, how their bodies are maturing through that process, how everybody's different, like we've talked about. Everybody's a different individual. They all have different skeletal structures. They all have different levels of athleticism, strength, everything to them. And so I've always kind of struggled with the idea, because obviously velocity is a huge part of the game. Obviously pitchability is. Everything kind of goes into that pie for me. And there's a ton of tools and techniques and data out there to help athletes succeed. And I've always kind of come to the decision, or the conclusion of, I'm not necessarily always sure when to start implementing some of those techniques or tools, like weighted baseballs or the radar gun or different, spin technology or anything else. When does that technically come into play? I mean, we use it with our high school athletes all the time. Is that necessarily a tool for our youth guys? So I'd love to hear your take on that and how you guys approach it.
So generally, the simple answer is basically for kids that are like 8 and under. I think they are much better suited to just like play the way that they want to play. They should engage with the stuff that they want to engage in, and they generally just don't need a lot of like structured training, right? Like that's just not a thing that is generally like either appropriate at a biological level, or again, in terms of just like the other considerations of putting them in these systems where it's like there's a perceived higher degree of consequence. Once kids check that box though, so once we're kind of 9, that is the period of time where, in my experience, we've had some success having kids start doing our training. To be very, very specific, what we're talking about is essentially a very vanilla arm care program, to keep it really like focused on the throwing side, right? So we're talking about things like J-bands, Jaeger Sport J-bands. Thank God for Alan Jaeger, right?
Love it.
And we're doing that and not doing like the infinite arm circles, because I'm trying to get some blood flow, some muscle activation, and some stabilization to the parts of my body that are involved with when I'm actually going to be able to throw, right? Because look, man, if you have kids that just show up to the field and they show up cold and they start playing catch, does that catch look great out of the box? No, it looks terrible. It looks terrible, man. They're complete like pie throwers. So if what you do over and over is that, and then you like warm up into it, well, like you just spent the first 5 minutes of catch play with like really crappy intention and subsequently really crappy mechanics. So when your mechanics are crappy in the game, why should I be surprised? You are what you do. And you spend at least 50% of your time with really crappy throwing. So again, like thank God for Alan Jaeger, man, because I think the Jaeger Sport J-bands are just, every kid in the country.
100%.
For us in the academy, next thing we do is the youth wrist weights. Essentially, what we're trying to do is do a couple things specifically. We're trying to strengthen the posterior shoulder, which is involved in the deceleration phase, essentially post-ball release, because one of the ways that guys can get hurt is we are accelerating faster than we can decelerate. And we got to focus on that, so we do wrist weights. We also are trying to kind of focus on pronation patterns to be able to drive that in, because if you're going to throw a fastball, a four-seam fastball naturally, you are going to pronate, and we need to be able to get kind of the timing of that dialed. We're also trying to drive some strength to what's called the flexor pronator mass, which is, we believe, to be pretty involved in protecting the UCL. So J-bands, wrist weights, and then for us, PlyoCare. The PlyoCare ball is not leather weighted baseballs. We are talking about soft, sand-filled balls, some that are heavier than a baseball, some that are lighter than a baseball. The 5-ounce baseball was not decreed upon by High to be the only weight that was correct for throwing. We have kids in the offseason throwing footballs, and nobody bats an eye. We have kids throwing tennis balls and skipping rocks, and nobody bats an eye. But when we start talking about overload and underload implements for throwing for youth kids, everybody's like, oh my God, weighted balls. And it's like, all right, look, the overwhelming majority of the research proves a very, very simple principle, which is that if you're throwing something that's heavier than a baseball, your arm moves slower. Because you're moving slower, you are generally producing less force on the joints. There's also some Nikolai Bernstein Human Biomechanics 101 stuff about force efficiency from adding additional load at an appropriate level. So we train with the overload stuff to try to drive more efficient movement patterns, because again, what are good mechanics if not mechanics that are specific to the individual and as efficient as possible? We have kids throwing underload balls because we're trying to develop the supramaximal, right? I'm trying to increase movement speed. If we do both of those things in conjunction and we do it safely with a structured plan, what we should be able to get is an increase in output, but an increase in efficiency. And that is good throwing. But again, I think you really, really got to emphasize the importance of structure and control there. Having a well-run arm care program doesn't mean that I'm going to run my program 3 days a week, but I'm also going to throw 50-pitch bullpens every other day when I'm not doing my PlyoCare stuff with mom or dad. That ain't it. Much like in strength training, right? The way that I get strong is both in part by like moving weight, but it's also by recovering after I lifted, right? So the same way that like if you go into a gym, and right now my squats are terrible. If I went out and like put 315 on the bar, I'm probably going to blow my spine out because I'm not ready to do that right now on a back squat. It doesn't make sense to go grab a weighted ball and try to do like a high intent throw or a pull down if you're not ready for that. We don't even have kids do pull downs with overload implements broadly. So if you're looking at any of the weighted ball research, and some of them says that a disproportionate number of kids got hurt, and that disproportionate number of kids was doing pull downs with 3-pound balls, first of all, nobody does that. Like, that's not part of our program, and that's not ever been part of that programming. So I would challenge anyone that's looking at that specific study, and people may know what I'm talking about, to ask a question of like, what was the intent? Was the intent really to do research about weighted balls, or was the intent to hurt kids? Because never in my life would I have a 14 or 15-year-old kid do a pull down like a high intent preps or pro hop or whatever you want to call it throw with a ball that heavy. That's just, it is irresponsible. So anyways, arm care. Essentially what we're trying to do is improve patterns and improve arm health. And if you do it correctly, it just works.
One of my biggest takeaways from this conversation with you, Deven, is that I kind of now view a lot of the work that you guys do is you guys are almost like doctors. It's almost like walking into a doctor's office. You're going to do an assessment. You're going to ask all these as many questions as possible. You're going to take in as many data points as possible and then give the appropriate plan. But the point of that is you guys have a structure and a reason and a why to what you are doing, and that is so important. And that's what I try to get across to so many youth coaches, because I get that question all the time. And it's just a simple question of, well, should I do weighted balls or should I do this? And I'm like, you're not asking the right questions. you're not even going down the right path to start. We need to talk about your kids. We need to talk about where they're at. We need to talk about what they're currently doing correctly, all the different questions before we ever get to that question. And then maybe, yes, some of them are absolutely ready for that at a certain pace, at a certain structure. And then we talk about their plans and then everything else. And then youth coaches kind of get their head kind of spinning. Oh, I should actually take into consideration all of that and not just go out and buy a Driveline product and throw it at a wall and hope I add 5 miles per hour and not get hurt. I mean, but that's the point. And that's what I want to give kudos to you and what you guys are talking about, because I want coaches who are listening, because I'm sure we'll attract a lot of people to listen just because of the Driveline name alone, because everybody knows who that is. But I want coaches to listen and learn and understand the amount of information that goes into the decisions that you're making.
I mean, I guess, I'm getting ready to finalize like my talk at ABCA in Chicago in January. And one of the things I'm going to kind of finish with is this idea that, like, I think people need to really understand some just like core ideology of what Driveline's about. We don't do a lot of towel drill. The reason we don't do a lot of towel drill is because there have been enough studies out there that, again, that suggested that, like, focusing on an overly linear part of your delivery kills rotational velocity. So right now, that's not a thing that we do. If there's new research that comes out tomorrow that's like, hey, the towel drill is the best thing for cueing kind of effective throwing mechanics, well, we're going to want to like validate that study, but we're going to do it because we're not dogmatic to anything other than like trying to do what's best for the players. And like, to a degree, my job is, it's not easy, but I have the absolute luxury of like listening to the smartest guys in the world and the smartest women in the world develop and like exhaustively go through what works and what doesn't work. Like, we've done studies internally on competitor products just to figure out if they worked, not because it's like, oh, I want to trash that thing, and we didn't trash it. We just did a study to see if it worked, because if it does work, we're going to do it. So it's like when Bill Hazel, Dean Jackson, Chris Langman, Juan Rodriguez, like any of our guys, and again, we have the same, stack of dudes on the HP side when it comes to our strength training, same stack of guys and girls on the hitting side. Man, they're just so relentless in this process of like trying to figure out what works and why are we making the decisions and choices that we're making. So that for me, I just get to distill down what those guys do and find a way to make it fit for the youth side. So it's like, for youth coaches out there, I would just say, look into some of our stuff, the free youth intro armchair PDF. If you get that thing, it's going to tell you, don't go out there and rip plyos on day one. You have to take a 4-week onboard. The first month of the program isn't throwing hard. Why? Because we want to gradually add stimulus so that we're ready to throw at that type of intention. So it's like, these guys where it's just like, oh, I did the Driveline and all these kids got hurt. And it's like, well, look, man, we have like a mountain of information about how to execute and schedule this thing. And if you have questions, support at drivelinebaseball.com, 425-523-4030. We got a crew of men and women in our CR department and I've been there. That's where I started at the company, was in CR. Their jobs is essentially to know everything about what we do. So if you have questions, man, I assure you that like the people that are in our company, I'm just so blessed to be a part of it, because all we want to do is just like grow the game and make it better and do what is best for the players, for the customer. And we just have an unrelenting search for continuing to like solve that problem over time.
Deven, I really appreciate this conversation, and I'm very big on the bandwagon of getting rid of dogmatic thinking, and always trying to find the best answers. And that's one of the reasons why we do podcasts, is that I want to meet you. I want to talk shop, and I want to get your thoughts on the space. And there's a lot of things I agree. There's some things I disagree. But again, I'm the one that asks the questions, and I think it's up to the audience to really figure out where they lie on that spectrum and find the best thing. And me personally, I think Driveline does it the best when it comes to relaying information and sharing what they're actually finding. Because there's a lot of people that withhold information, which is not what this space should be all about.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's like we have a free resources page. It just has a mountain of stuff on it. We have blogs that, like when Kyle was writing them from like a decade ago, And it's all out there, man. And again, there's a high likelihood that if we did this again in 12 months, maybe 50% of the stuff that I believe in, I might think differently. Because again, the only thing that I'm trying to serve is just the needs of my customer, my players and families. Because I love every single one of these kids, and some of them are really, really good at baseball right now. Some of them have a ways to go, and I love them the same. So what we're trying to do is essentially just serve those elite competitors. We will produce some outlier outcomes because our stuff works. So you're going to see kids in our program, we're only in year 2 of our academy. We're going to have 18-year-olds throwing, we got some dudes, but we also have kids who are going to go through our program, and they're going to have competitive high school baseball experience, and they're going to be able to look back at their time in the game and be like, man, I feel really good about that. And like you said, if that leads to a game of catch with a kid 10, 20 years down the road, and that kid goes on to play the game, that kid goes on to coach the game, that kid goes on to be a biomechanist or an analyst or like whatever. We love this thing so much. I just want more people to do it, and we're trying to develop systems and an ecosystem that empowers that.
Yep. Deven, give your Twitter handle, because you are a great follow. Also, could you also give any other information out there that you'd like people to know about?
Absolutely. So it's just Deven Morgan. It's at DEVEN, 2 E's. In terms of, people want to learn about what we're doing at the Academy, drivelinebaseball.com/Driveline Academy. I would say, again, I would really, really strongly encourage people to check out the free resources that we have and just start there, because that's where I started. I started with downloading the free 8-week velo program. I started with downloading the free, youth intro arm care program. So we have stuff there for youth coaches, high school coaches, college coaches. The blog has a crap ton of information. If you want to go a little bit up the chain, the Youth Baseball Development Certification is essentially aimed at guys in the rec baseball space for how to execute all the stuff that we talked about over the course of a Little League season. We have a free youth practice guidebook that's coming out pretty soon. Obviously, Driveline Plus gets you access to like a 500 now, or like a whole bunch of video library done by smartest guys and girls in the world about like these really high level concepts, and also a bunch of youth stuff as well. And also being a part of Driveline Plus gives you a huge discount on our equipment, and it gets you into a Driveline Plus Slack community where it's like, if you want to ask Chris Langan a question about pitch design, well, guess what? Chris does those things like every other Friday. He'll just do like an open Q&A or something. We really,
That's
awesome.
Huge.
There's a bunch of stuff there, whether it's just free stuff or whether you want to pay, kind of get into that side of the ecosystem. We just want to engage with people. Basically, we want to be where they are. So just let us know, man, or support at drivelinebaseball.com, 425-523-4030. Go talk to my man Rhodes, Frank, Allison, Chris. Man, it's a company full of dudes, man, and I'm just really, really appreciative of being on the pirate ship.
And if you are going to the ABCA, you can listen to, you're going to be talking at the ABCA in Chicago.
Yeah, I got like 28 days to finalize my presentation. So, I'll be, my sleep will be driven by anxiety, a lot of 3 o'clock in the morning wake-ups over the next month. But yeah, man.
Well, I think if there's anything like this conversation, you're going to knock it out of the ballpark. Cool. Well, Deven, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Guys, please subscribe to the show, write a review, follow Dave, unfollow me. No, I'm joking. Follow me too. Thanks, guys, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
Thanks, guys.